I'm Pat Tully of the Ketchikan Public Library, and this is Reading Aloud. Happy New Year to all of you. Hope you're having a good New Year so far. So this evening I'm going to be reading a funny poem by William McGonagall, then a couple of short pieces by J.M. Barrie, and then followed up by a poem by Tennyson to bring in the new year. So let's get started. We will start with The Tay Bridge Disaster by William McGonagall. McGonagall was kind of famous for bad poetry, so we will get started. He's most famous for this particular poem, which takes place around the new year. So, The Tay Bridge Disaster. Beautiful railway bridge of the silvery Tay. Alas, I am very sorry to say that 90 lives have been taken away on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a very long time. 'Twas about 7 o'clock at night, and the wind it blew with all its might, and the rain came pouring down, and the dark clouds seemed to frown, and the demon of the air seemed to say, I'll blow down the bridge of Tay. When the train left Edinburgh, the passengers' hearts were light and felt no sorrow. But Boreas blew a terrific gale, which made their hearts for to quail. And many of the passengers with fear did say, I hope God will send us safe across the bridge of Tay. But when the train came near to Wormit Bay, Boreas he did loud and angry bray, and shook the central girders of the bridge of Tay on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a very long time. So the train sped on with all its might, and bonny Dundee soon hove in sight, and the passengers' hearts felt light, thinking they would enjoy themselves on the new year, with their friends at home they loved most dear, and wished them all a happy new year. So the train moved slowly along the bridge of Tay, until it was about midway. Then the central girders with a crash gave way, and down went the train and passengers into the Tay. The storm fiend did loudly bray, because 90 lives had been taken away on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a very long time. As soon as the catastrophe came to be known, the alarm from the mouth to mouth was blown, and the cry rang out all o'er the town, Good heavens, the Tay Bridge is blown down! And a passenger train from Edinburgh, which filled all the people's hearts with sorrow, and made them for to turn pale, because none of the passengers were saved to tell the tale, how the disaster happened on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a very long time. It must have been an awful sight to witness in the dusky moonlight, while the storm fiend did laugh and the angry did bray, along the railway bridge of the silvery Tay. Oh, the ill-fated bridge of the silvery Tay! I must now conclude my lay by telling the world fearlessly without the least dismay that your central girders would not have given way, at least many sensible men do say, had they been supported on each side by buttresses. At least many sensible men confesses. For the stronger we our houses do build, the less chance we have of being killed. The end. So now I'm going to read a couple of short pieces by J.M. Barrie. J.M. Barrie was born in Scotland in 1860, and he wrote short pieces for British newspapers and magazines. He's best known today for one of his novels called Peter Pan, which, as you know, has been adapted for the stage and screen several times since it was written back in 1902 or 1903, I believe. So anyway, this evening I'm going to read a few of his short pieces, starting with A Holiday in Bed. Now is the time for a real holiday. Take it in bed if you are wise. People have tried a holiday in bed before now and found it a failure, but that was because they were ignorant of the rules. They went to bed with the open intention of staying there, say 3 days, and found to their surprise that each morning they wanted to get up. This was a novel experience to them. They flung about restlessly and probably shortened their holiday. The proper thing is to take your holiday in bed with a vague intention of getting up in another quarter of an hour. The real pleasure of lying in bed after you are awake is largely due to the feeling that you ought to get up. To take another quarter of an hour then becomes a luxury. You are, in short, in the position of a man who dined on larks. Had he seen the hundreds that were ready for him, all set out on one monster dish, they would have turned his stomach. But getting them 2 at a time, he went on eating until all the larks were exhausted. His feeling of uncertainty as to whether these might not be his last 2 larks is your feeling that, perhaps, you will have to get up in a quarter of an hour. Deceive yourself in this way, and your holiday in bed will pass only too quickly. Sympathy is what all the world is craving for, and sympathy is what the ordinary holiday maker never gets. How can we be expected to sympathize with you when we know that you're off to Perthshire to fish? No, we say that we wish we were you, and forget that your holiday is sure to be a hollow mockery, that your child will jam her finger in the railway carriage and scream to the end of the journey, that you will lose your luggage, that the guard will notice that your dog is beneath your seat and insist on its being paid for, that you will be caught in a Scotch mist on the top of a mountain and be put on gruel for a fortnight, that your wife will fret herself into a fever about the way the servant, who has been left at home, is carrying on with her cousins, the milkman, and the policeman, and that you will be had up for trespassing. Yet, when you tell us you are off tomorrow, we have never the sympathy to say, "Poor fellow, I hope you'll pull through somehow." If it is an exhibition you go to gape at, we never picture you dragging your weary legs from one department to another and wondering why your back is so sore. Should it be the seaside, we talk heartlessly to you about the briny, though we must know, if we would stop to think, that if there is one holiday more miserable than all the others, it is that spent at the seaside, when you wander the weary beach and fling pebbles at the sea and wonder how long it will be till dinner time. Were we to come down to see you, we would probably find you not at the beach, but moving slowly through the village, looking in at one milliner's window, or laboriously reading what one grocer's labels say on the subject of pale ale, compressed beef, or vinegar. There was never an object that called aloud for sympathy more than you do, but you get not a jot of it. You should take the first train home and go to bed for 3 days. To enjoy your holiday in bed to the full, you should let it be vaguely understood that there is something amiss with you. Don't go into details, for they are not necessary. And besides, you want to be dreamy more or less, and the dreamy state is not consistent with a definite ailment. The moment one takes to bed, he gets sympathy. He may be suffering from a tearing headache or a tooth that makes him cry out. But if he goes about his business, or even flops in a chair, true sympathy is denied him. Let him take to bed with one of those illnesses of which he can say with accuracy that he is not quite certain what is the matter with him, and his wife, for instance, will want to bathe his brow. She must not be made too anxious. That would not only be cruel to her, but it would wake you from the dreamy state. She must simply see that you are not yourself. Women have an idea that unless men are not themselves, they will not take to bed, and as a consequence your wife is tenderly thoughtful of you. Every little while she will ask you if you are feeling any better now, and you can reply with the old regard for truth that you are much about it. You may even, for your own pleasure, talk of getting up now, when she will earnestly urge you to stay in bed until you feel easier. You consent. Indeed, you are ready to do anything to please her. The ideal holiday in bed does not require the presence of a ministering angel in the room all day. You frequently prefer to be alone and point out to your wife that you cannot have her trifling with her health for your sake, and so she must go out for a walk. She's reluctant, but finally goes, protesting that you are the most unselfish of men and only too good for her. This leaves a pleasant aroma behind it, for even when lying in bed, we like to feel that we are uncommonly fine fellows. After she is gone, you get up cautiously and, walking stealthily to the wardrobe, produce from the pocket of your greatcoat a good novel. A holiday in bed must be arranged for beforehand. With a gleam in your eye, you slip back to bed, double your pillows to make it higher, and begin to read. You have only got to the 4th page when you make a horrible discovery, namely that the book is not cut. An experienced holiday-maker would have cut it the night before, but this is your first real holiday, or perhaps you have been thoughtless. In any case, you have now matter to think of. You are torn in 2 different ways. There's your coat on the floor with a knife in it, but you cannot reach the coat without getting up again. Ought you to get the knife or to give up reading? Perhaps it takes a quarter of an hour to decide this question, and you decide it by discovering a 3rd course. Being a sort of an invalid, you have certain privileges which would be denied you if you were merely sitting in a chair in the agonies of neuralgia. One of the glorious privileges of a holiday in bed is that you are entitled to cut books with your fingers. So you cut the novel in this way and read on. Those who have never tried it may fancy that there's a lack of incidents in a holiday in bed. There could not be a more monstrous mistake. You are in the middle of a chapter when suddenly you hear a step upon the stair. Your loving ears tell you that your wife has returned and is hastening to you. Now what happens? The book disappears beneath the pillow, and when she enters the room softly, you are lying there with your eyes shut. This is not merely incident, it is drama. What happens next depends upon circumstances. She says in a low voice, "Are you feeling any easier now, John?" No answer. "Oh, I believe he's sleeping." Then she steals from the room and you begin to read again. During a holiday in bed, one never thinks, of course, of analyzing his actions. If you had done so in this instance, you would have seen that you pretended sleep because you had got to an exciting passage. You love your wife, but, wife or no wife, you must see how the passage ends. Possibly the scene plays a little differently, as thus. "John, are you feeling any easier now?" No answer. "Are you asleep?" No answer. "What a pity! I don't want to waken him, yet the fowl will be spoiled." "Is that you back, Marian?" "Yes, dear, I thought you were asleep." "No, only thinking." "You think too much, dear. I have cooked a chicken for you." "I have no appetite." "I'm so sorry, but I can give it to the children." "Oh, as it's cooked, you might as well bring it up." In that case, the reason of your change of action is obvious. But why do you not let your wife know that you've been reading? This is another matter that you never reason about. Perhaps it is because of your craving for sympathy, and you fear that if you were seen enjoying a novel, the sympathy would go. Or perhaps it is that a holiday in bed is never perfect without a secret. Monotony must be guarded against, and so long as you keep the book to yourself, your holiday in bed is a healthy excitement. A stolen book, as we may call it, is like a stolen fruit, sweeter than what you can devour openly. The boy enjoys his stolen apple because at any moment he may have to slip it down the leg of his trousers and pretend that he has merely climbed the tree to enjoy the scenery. You enjoy your book doubly because you feel it is a forbidden pleasure. Or do you conceal the book from your wife lest she should think that you are overexerting yourself? She must not be made anxious on your account. Ah, that is it. People who pretend, for it must be pretense, that they enjoy their holiday in the country, explain that the hills or the sea give them such an appetite. I could never myself feel the delight of being able to manage an extra herring for breakfast, but it should be pointed out that neither mountains nor oceans give you such an appetite as a holiday in bed. What makes people eat more anywhere is that they have nothing else to do, and in bed you have lots of time for meals. As for the quality of the food supplied, there is no comparison. In the Highlands it is ham and eggs all day until you sicken. At the seaside it is fish until the bones stick in your mouth. But in bed, oh, there you get something worth eating. You don't take 3 big meals a day, but 12 little ones, and each time it is something different from the last. There are delicacies for breakfast, for your 4 luncheons and your 5 dinners. You explain to your wife that you have lost your appetite, and she believes you, but at the same time she has the sense to hurry on your dinner. At the clatter of dishes, for which you have been lying listening, you raise your poor head and say faintly, "Really, Marian, I can't touch food." "But this is nothing," she says, "only the wing of a partridge." You take a side glance at it, and you see that there's also the other wing and the body and the 2 legs. Your alarm thus dispelled, you say, "I really can't." "But dear, it is so beautifully cooked." "Yes, but I have no appetite." "But try to take it, John, for my sake." Then for her sake, you say that she can leave it on the chair, and perhaps you will just taste it. As soon as she is gone, you devour that partridge, and when she comes back, she has the sense to say, "Why, you have scarcely eaten anything. What could you take for supper?" You say that you can take nothing, but if she likes, she can cook a large sole, only you won't be able to touch it. "Poor dear," she says, "your appetite has completely gone." And then she rushes to the kitchen to cook the sole with her own hands. In half an hour she steals into your room with it, and then you, who have been wondering why she is such a time, start up protesting, "I hope, Marian, that this is nothing for me." "Only the least little bit of a sole, dear." "But I told you I could eat nothing." "Well, this is nothing. It is so small." You look again and see with relief that it is a large sole. "I would much rather that you took it away." "But dear, I tell you I have no appetite." "Of course I know that, but how can you hope to preserve your strength if you eat so little? You've had nothing all day." You glance at her face to see if she is in earnest, for you can remember 3 breakfasts, 4 luncheons, and 2 dinners, and sandwiches in between, but evidently she is not jesting. Then you yield. "Oh, well, to keep my health up, I may just put a fork into it." "Do, dear, it will do you good, though you can have no caring for it." Take a holiday in bed, if only to discover what an angel your wife is. There is only one thing to guard against. Never call it a holiday. Continue not to feel sure what's wrong with you, and to talk vaguely of getting up presently. Your wife will suggest calling in a doctor, but pooh-pooh him. Be firm on this point. The chances are that he won't understand your case. The end. And the second piece is thoughtful boys make thoughtful men. Urquhart is a boy who lives in fear that his friends and relations will send him the wrong birthday presents. Before his birthday came round this year, he dropped them pretty broad hints as to the kind of gift he would prefer, supposing they meant to remember the occasion. He worked his people differently, according to the relationship that existed between him and them. Thus to his mother he simply wrote, "A fishing rod is what I want." But to an uncle, from whom there was only the possibility of a present, he said, "By the way, next Monday week is my birthday, and my mother is going to send me a fishing rod. Wouldn't it be a jolly rot if another body sent me a fishing rod? Your affectionate and studious nephew, Thomas Urquhart." To an elderly lady, with whom he had once spent part of his summer holiday, he wrote, "By the by," he always came to the point with the by the by, "next Monday week is my birthday. I am wondering if anybody will send me a cake like the ones you bake so beautifully." That lady should, of course, figuratively have punched Urquhart's head, but his communication charmed her. She did not, however, send him a cake. He had a letter from her in a few days, in which, without referring to his insinuating remarks about his birthday and her cakes, she expressed a hope that he was working hard. Urquhart thought this was very promising, and sent a reply that undid him. "I am sweating," he said, "no end, and I think there is no pleasure like perusing books. When the other chaps go away to play, I stay at school and peruse books." After that, Urquhart counted the old lady among his certainties, and so she was, after a manner. On his birthday he received a gift from her, and also a letter, in which she said that her original intention had been to send him a cake. "But your nice letter," she went on, "in which you say you are fond of reading, reminds me that you are getting to be a big boy, so I send you a book instead." Urquhart anxiously undid the brown paper in which the book was wrapped. It was a volume of mild biographies entitled "Thoughtful Boys Make Thoughtful Men." From its first appearance among us, this book caused a certain amount of ill feeling. I learned by accident that Urquhart, on the strength of the lady's letter, had stated for a fact to his comrades that she was going to send him a cake. He had also taken Fleming Secundus to a pastry cook's in the vicinity of the school, and asked him to turn his eyes upon a cake which had the place of honor in the center of the window. Secundus admitted with a sigh that it was a beauty. Without comment, Urquhart led him to the local confectioner's and pointed out another cake. Secundus again passed favorable criticism, the words he used, I have reason to believe, being, "Oh, crikey!" By this time Urquhart had exhausted the shops of an interesting kind in our neighborhood, and he and his companion returned to the school. For a time Urquhart said nothing, but at last he broke the silence. "You saw yon 2 cakes?" he asked Secundus, who replied with a smack of his lips in the affirmative. "Then let me tell you," said Urquhart solemnly, "that the 2 of them rolled together don't come within 5 miles of the cake I'm to get on my birthday." Tremendous news like this spreads through a school like smoke, and Urquhart was courted as he had never been before. One of the most pitiful cases of toadyism known to me was witnessed that very day in the football field. I was playing in a school match on the same side as Urquhart and a boy named Cocky Jones by his associates because of his sublime impertinence to his master. While Urquhart was playing, his shoelace became loosened, and he stooped to tie it. "I say, Urquhart," cried Cocky, "let me do that for you." It will thus be seen, taking one thing with another, that Urquhart's confidence in the old lady had raised high hopes. "Is this the day Urquhart gets his cake?" the fellows asked each other. Consider their indignation when he got, instead, "Thoughtful boys make thoughtful men." Secundus refused to speak to him. Williamson, Green, Robbins, Tosh, and others scowled as if he had stolen their cake. Cocky Jones kicked him and bolted. The boy who felt the disappointment most, however, was Urquhart himself. He has never been a shining light in his classes, but that day he stumbled over the Latin grammar at every step. From 9 to 10 he was quiet and sullen, like one felled by the blow. It is, I believe, notorious that in a fair fight Cocky Jones could not stand up before Urquhart for a moment. Yet, when Cocky kicked, Urquhart did not pursue him. Between 10 and 11, Urquhart had a cynical countenance, which implied that his faith in humanity was gone. By 12 he looked fierce, as if he meant to right his benefactress and give her a piece of his mind. I saw him during the dinner hour in hot controversy with Green and Tosh, who were evidently saying that he had deceived them. From this time he was pugnacious, like one determined to have it out with somebody, and as he can use his fists, this mood made his companions more respectful. Fleming Secundus is his particular chum, and after the first bitterness of disappointment, Secundus returned to his allegiance. He offered to mark Cocky Jones's face, I fancy, for I saw him in full pursuit of Cocky in the playground. Having made it up, he and Urquhart then discussed the matter calmly in a corner. They had several schemes before them. One was to send the book back, saying that Urquhart already had a copy of it. "But I haven't," said Urquhart. "Williamson has read it, though," said Secundus, as if that was much the same thing. "But though we did send it back," Urquhart remonstrated, "the chances are that she would send me another book in its place." His faith, you see, had quite gone. "You could tell her you had got such a lot of books that you would prefer a cake for a change." Urquhart said that would be putting it too plain. "Well, then," said Secundus, "even though she did send you another book, it would perhaps be a better one than that. Tell her to send The Boy Crusoe's. I haven't read it." "I have, though," said Urquhart. "Well, she could send The Prairie Hunters." "She's not the kind," said Urquhart. "It's always these improving books she buys." Ultimately, the two boys agreed upon a line of action which was hardly what the reader might expect. Urquhart wrote letters of thanks to all those who had remembered his birthday, and to the old lady the letter which passed through my hands read as follows: "Dear Miss, I sit down to thank you very faithfully for your favor, namely, the book entitled Thoughtful Boys Make Thoughtful Men. It is a jolly book, and I like it no end better than a cake, which would soon be ate up, and then nothing to show for it. I am reading your beautiful present regular, and hoping it will make me a thoughtful boy, so as I may be a thoughtful man. No more at present. I am, dear Miss, your most sincere friend, Thomas Urquhart." Our boys generally end up their letters in some such way as that, it being a method of making their epistles cover a little more paper. As I feared, Urquhart's letter was merely diplomatic. He had not come round to the opinion that after all a book was better than a cake. But he had seen the point of Fleming's sudden suggestion that his best plan would be to keep in with his benefactress. Secundus had shown that if Miss M. was bothered about this year's present, she would be less likely to send anything next year, and this sank into Urquhart's mind. Hence the tone of his letter of thanks. It remains to follow the inglorious career of this copy of Thoughtful Boys Make Thoughtful Men. First, Urquhart was openly contemptuous of it, and there seemed to be a probability of its only being used as a missile. Soon, however, he dropped hints that it was a deeply interesting story, following these hints up with the remark that he was open to offers. He and Fleming Secundus had quite a tiff about it, though they are again good friends. Secundus, it appears, had gone to the length of saying that it was worth a shilling, and had taken it to his bed to make sure of this. Urquhart considered it as good as bought, but Secundus returned it to him the next day. Examination of the book roused the suspicions of Urquhart, who charged Secundus with having read it by peeping between the pages, which, to enhance its commercial value, had remained uncut. This Secundus denied, but he had left the mark of his thumb upon it. Eventually the book was purchased by Cocky Jones, but not without a row. Cocky went up to Urquhart one day and held out a shilling, saying that he would give it for Thoughtful Boys Make Thoughtful Men. The owner wanted to take the shilling at once and give up the book later in the day, but Cocky insisted on its being put into his hands immediately. That Jones should be anxious to become the possessor of an improving book surprised Urquhart, but in his haste to make sure of the shilling, he handed over Thoughtful Boys Make Thoughtful Men. Within the hour of the striking of this bargain, a rumor reached Urquhart's ears that Cocky had resold the work for 1 6d. Inquiries were instituted, which led to a discovery. At our school there is a youth called Dickie Jenkinson, who, though not exactly a thoughtful boy, has occasional aspirations in that direction. Being for the moment wealthy, Jenkinson had remarked, in the presence of Cocky, that 1 6d would not be too much to give for Urquhart's copy of Thoughtful Boys Make Thoughtful Men. Feeling his way cautiously, Cocky asked whether he meant that the book would be cheap at 1 6d to anyone who wanted it, or whether he, Dickie, was willing and able to expend that sum on it. Thus brought to bay, Jenkinson solemnly declared that he meant to take Urquhart and offered that very day. Cocky made off to think this matter over, for he was aware that the book had already been offered to Fleming Secundus for £1. He saw that by taking prompt action he might clear sixpence before bedtime. Unfortunately, he was not able to buy the book from Urquhart, for he was destitute of means, and he knew it would be mere folly to ask Urquhart for credit. In these painful circumstances, he took Robbins into his confidence. At first, he merely asked Robbins to lend him £1, and Robbins merely replied that he would do no such thing. To show that the money would be returned promptly, Cocky then made a clean breast of it, after which Robbins was ready to lend him an ear. Robbins, however, stipulated that he should get half of the spoils. Cocky, as has been seen, got the book from Urquhart, but when it came to the point, Jenkinson was reluctant to part with the 1 and 6pence. In this extremity, Cocky appealed to Robbins, who at once got hold of Dicky and threatened to slaughter him if he did not keep to his bargain. Thus frightened, Jenkinson bought the book. On hearing of this, Urquhart considered that he had been swindled and set off in quest of Cocky. That boy was not to be found, however, until his threepence had disappeared in tarts. I got to know of this affair through Robbins' backing up of Cocky and telling Urquhart that nobody was afraid of him. A ring was immediately formed round Urquhart and Robbins, which I had the pleasure of breaking up. Since I sat down to write the adventures of thoughtful boys make thoughtful men, I have looked through the book. Jenkinson read several chapters of it, and then offered it for next to nothing to anybody who had a fancy for being thoughtful. As no bidder was forthcoming, he in the end lost heart and presented it to the school library. A gentleman who visited us lately and looked through the library picked it up and said that he was delighted to observe that the boys kept their books so clean. Yet not so long ago, he was a boy at our school himself. The end. So the last piece for this evening is by Alfred Lord Tennyson in honor of the new year. So it's a poem in memorandum. Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out wild bells and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new, ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind, for those that here we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor, ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause, and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life, with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right, ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease, ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old, ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land, ring in the Christ that is to be. Thank you very much. Again, Happy New Year, and have a good week.